Over the years, there have been waves of UFO sightings around the world, such as 1947 to 1948, just after World War II in America, which peaked in 1952. 1954 sightings in many parts of Italy, and the Belgian wave that went from 1989 to 1990. In 1973, America appeared to be in the middle of yet another wave of UFO sightings, where there were a huge number of reports in the newspapers and the media. On August the 30th, witnesses from 22 towns in Georgia claimed to have seen a strange object in the sky. On October the 3rd, a deputy sheriff and 4 park rangers observed a saucer-shaped object that appeared to be the size of 2 houses slowly flying over Tupelo, Mississippi. It was described as having red, green and yellow lights. Possibly the most famous of the 1973 sightings and abductions took place in Pascagoula in Mississippi. On the evening of October the 11th, 1973, Charles Hickson, 42, and Calvin Parker, 19, were fishing on the west bank of the Pascagoula River. As it started to get dark, they heard a whirring sound and saw flashes of blue light on the water. As they looked up, he saw an oval-shaped object approximately 30 to 40 feet across and 8 to 10 feet high. 3 beings floated out of the craft and took them aboard. Paralysed but conscious, the 2 men were subjected to a medical exam by a giant robotic eye before being returned to shore, whereupon the craft shot off into the night sky. Charles Hickson and Calvin Parker immediately reported the incident to Keesler Air Force Base in Biloxi, Mississippi, and the Jackson County Sheriff's Department in Mississippi. An audio recording revealed that the men were traumatized, worried about their families, and had no intentions of deceiving anyone, and Charles Hickson also passed a polygraph examination. Dr. J. Allen Hynek, the well-known American astronomer, professor and ufologist at Northwestern University, studied the case and concluded, "There is no question in my mind that these 2 men had a very real, frightening experience." On October the 17th, 1973, Paul Brown saw 2 strange beings as he was driving near Danielsville, Georgia. He later told police that a bright light had passed over his car and made a swishing sound. He then saw a cone-shaped object land in the road about 300 feet in front of him that made him skid to a halt. Then small figures emerged from the object, where he quickly grabbed his gun from the glove compartment. He then opened the car door and alighted from the vehicle before crouching behind the door, expecting the worst. The beings abruptly stopped in their tracks and returned to their craft and flew off. As it was flying away, Brown fired some shots at the object, but by this point it was too far away. At 9:45 p.m. on October the 22nd, 1973, Donna and Dwayne Donathan were driving east on Indiana State Road 26 from Donna Donathan's mother's house to their home in Hartford City, Indiana. When they were a short distance from their home, and after rounding a curve and driving over a small hill, they saw what they initially believed were 2 children about 4 feet tall, standing in the middle of the road. They stopped about 30 feet away from them, and with the headlights on, they were now close enough to see that they weren't children. According to Donna Donathan, they seemed confused and hopped, where their feet would come up slowly, one at a time, and the arms would flop funny. They moved slower than humans, and their feet and arms were raised up in a strange manner, and their feet came off the ground. They were bright silver in colour and lightly built. Their feet had what looked like boxes on them, and larger than a shoe, and she did not see any hands. Donna does not remember hearing a sound, but the car was still running and a tape was playing at a high volume, which was probably masking any sound the object was making. The clothing or skin on the beings appeared to be tight-fitting. At this stage, Donna was quite frightened and sped off quickly past the beings. She drove in a panic for several blocks before her husband suggested they pull over at an old church. Throughout the incident, Dwayne was skeptical because he had not gotten a good look at the beings and still believed they were children. Now more composed and despite being frightened, Donna insisted her husband drive back to the area, and if it turned out they were children, he would scold them for playing on the road. When they arrived at the spot, everything was quiet, but did see some unusual lights in the sky which they chose to ignore. They then drove to Donna's mother's house, and Donna was so distressed that they thought she would need a doctor, but she eventually recovered. Donna was later interviewed by Aerial Phenomena Research Organisation field investigator Donald Worley about the incident. On October the 22nd, 1973, Gary Flatter had to suddenly jam his foot on the brakes because on the road in front of him was an assortment of animals crossing the road, such as rabbits, a raccoon, a possum, and several cats. As Gary was observing this, there was a weird high-pitched noise. He could see that the animals had come from a nearby field, and when he looked towards the hedge, he saw two silver-suited beings staring at him. The beings were about 4 feet tall with egg-like heads that seemed to be covered by gas masks. Instead of being perturbed by its presence, they proceeded to entertain Gary by jumping high into the air before floating down, then flying away, leaving a faint red trail. Gary's description added more details to that of Donna's, who said the creatures had egg-shaped heads with masks and a tube coming out of them that went into the creatures' chests. Donna described their movements, and her description was similar to that of Gary's, where they moved up about 3 feet off the ground and then went back down, all in slow motion, which they did 3 times before flying away into the darkness. The following day, Deputy Townsend, Gary Flatter and Donna Donathan went to the area where they had encountered the beings. In a nearby field, they found 7 3/4-inch impressions 3 inches wide that looked as though they'd been made by a heel that was not as round as ordinary heels. It had not rained for days, and the 3 of them, weighing an average of 200 pounds, left no footprints. A short time after midnight on November the 4th, 1973, Rick Snow from Goffstown, New Hampshire, ordered his dog to attack 2 silver-suited figures that were in his backyard. His German Shepherd, that was well trained, ran towards the beings, but when she got to within 30 feet of them, they just stared at her, whereupon the dog immediately stopped and growled at them. She then sheepishly walked back to her surprised owner. She then walked into the house and started whining. She was clearly terrified of the beings. Rick Snow said that he too became frightened, where he'd suddenly become overpowered by a sense of fear. He was also carrying his .38 caliber pistol, but his hands were shaking too much for him to use it. He ran back inside the house and watched the strange beings from inside with his dog from the window. He later described them as looking luminous, with oversized pointed ears, dark egg-shaped recesses for eyes with large pointed noses. The small figures appeared to be picking things up from the ground and placing them in a silver bag. Their movements were slow and deliberate, and after a short while they just walked into the woods and disappeared from view. He quickly ran to the police, but before they'd arrived, he saw the woods light up in an eerie light and then went dark again. When the police eventually arrived, they could see that Snow had seen something strange and terrifying, as he could not stop shaking and was extremely pale as he attempted to describe what had happened to him and his dog. At the end of 1973, a Gallup poll showed that 15 million Americans believed they'd seen a UFO, and 51% of the population believed that UFOs were real. Why do some reports of UFO sightings or even abductions come in waves? Could it happen after certain events around the world, such as nuclear testing or other world events, or are they just random?